Hey, everybody. Oh, this is exciting to be back. I'm Colin Campbell. If you don't know me, I lead the team at saleshacker, and I haven't hosted one of our community events in a while. I did one a few weeks ago, but I've been out of practice for a while. So I'm really, really pumped to be here with all of you. Thanks for giving us some of your time today. If you've joined a saleshacker webinar or community event before, then you know that we take very seriously the fact that you took time out of your day to be here live with us. And so what we are not going to do today is we are not going to just talk at you. You're not just going to sit here and watch us talk about something. What we are going to do is make this a conversation with you. So to start that off right now, as people are still joining in, I want you to know there's other people here. At the bottom of your screen, open up the chat window and please introduce yourselves. Make sure you got your visibility set to panelists and attendees. Y'all can see everybody. I'm gonna wait. I'm serious about this. You got to do it. Got to introduce yourselves. I got to know who's here. Hey, BJ, thanks for joining. Kevin from Indianapolis, head of Rev Ops. Cool, Kevin. Dan Herman dialed in from NYC. We got Jordan Armstrong, excuse me, in Austin, CEO at Mr. Automation. Shout out, Mr. Automation. Steve from Oklahoma, Vicky, Atlanta. Hey, everybody. Thanks for doing that. You can keep the conversation going in that sidebar. If you have a question, we will take questions throughout. So if you have a question that you want me to see it, I promise I'll see it if you put it in the Q&A. Okay. And then here's the last bit of housekeeping. We're recording this. So as much as I want you to be here and be present and give yourself permission to not check emails while you're sitting here talking with us, if you absolutely have to step away, don't worry. We'll send you the recording later. That's all the housekeeping we're going to do. We're going to jump right in. Today, we're talking about how to build a defensible RevOps team structure. And luckily, I don't have to talk about it because I'm here to learn. But we're joined by some people who can really help us nail this down. So Rob Dandorph is here. He's the VP of Global Revenue Operations at Behavox. Previously at Stack Overflow, has built a couple revenue operations teams now. Hey, Rob, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. It's fantastic to be here.
Pumped. Oh, this is a good one. I'm seeing in the chat, by the way, people are dropping in their LinkedIn profiles. Feel free to do that, y'all. Make some connections. I've seen people land deals in Sales Hacker webinars before, make lifelong friends. Crazy things can happen. Anyway, welcome, Rob. Thanks for being here. We've also got Harish Mohan, is SVP of Revenue Operations and Excellence at Outreach, and previously at NetSuite as well. And you did a lot of crazy stuff in NetSuite. You were telling me the other day, launching all kinds of international offices. It blew my mind. So welcome, Harish. Thanks for being here.
Absolute pleasure being here. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Glad we were able to get together and figure out what we collectively are building in this RevOps world.
Yeah, let's do it. And then so the normal intro for Brandon Roberts is that he used to be a professional baseball player. But if I were you, Brandon, I'd be getting kind of tired of that. So you should give me another fun fact to work with. But Brandon is also the Chief Commercial Officer at Xplor. So welcome, Brandon. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Colin. I appreciate it. I'm excited to be here. I love this topic. And just, a little bit about my past. I've been a seller, sales manager, RevOps, and now I'm overseeing that function. So super pumped to dive in, and I'll get back to you on that other fun fact. I'll have to think about what you can use moving forward.
All right, sounds good. I'm going to drop a random fun fact. I just decided this. We did not prep on this, everybody. I just decided I'm going to drop a random fun fact at the 12-minute mark. And so if in the chat, if you can tell me what the answer is to my random fun fact, I'll send you some Sales Hacker swag. We get crazy here. It's totally off the cuff.
We're off
suspense.
We're off script already.
All right, let's
suspense.
Jump in. That's enough rigmarole. So we're going to just really briefly set the stage. So RevOps. What is RevOps? Why is it necessary? Harish, I'm going to go to you for this one. Just really condensed, what are we doing here? Why are we here?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Colin. I don't think we had a choice in the matter of bringing together this group called Revenue Operations, because
fundamentally, I think what all of us have been through is a change and shift in the marketplace where, a few things happened. Number one, this whole thing called the internet became pervasive and all businesses were online. Then we moved to a subscription model. Then we moved to a multi-channel model. And the traditional ways we engage your buyers, especially in B2B tech, were no longer relevant, right? The days were gone where somebody created marketing leads, somebody sold software, the PS team dared them to implement the software, and then we started charging maintenance revenue like extortion so that we kept that software running, right? And we moved to a model where the customer has the ultimate control in the relationship, and the customer experience from when they come to us with the initial education to when they continue to unlock value and grow with us has to be orchestrated in one life cycle, which we call the customer journey. And making sure everyone's building against that journey, against that business model, and we continuously keep a singular experience is critical. And that's transcended beyond just tech, right? And that kind of experience is what we want when we do any kind of buying or engage in any kind of service. So I think the market moving, the customer and buyer becoming more intelligent is forced this on us. And we're at that inflection point where we have to run the experience as one and not as a piecemeal in silos. And I think the analogy I use, like when we did in my past life and we ran it at silos, we ended up building like the Winchester Mystery House. Everyone had their version and it had 50,000 staircases and dead ends. And you came in the end like, why aren't we growing margin? Why isn't cloud revenue growing? Like, well, because we're all running a different business. The minute we took a step back and focused on core key outcomes on that journey, we ended up building, the Taj Mahal.
Yeah. So first of all, I love that analogy and the juxtaposition of Winchester Mystery House with dead end staircases with Taj Mahal. If you want to picture what Rev Ops can do for you, just, imagine Taj Mahal. All right, Rob, I'm going to go to you then really quickly. So Harish outlined why we're doing this. Can you tell us just like state of the state? Where are we? Where is the Rev Ops function in development right now?
Yeah, I think that the fact that there are so many people that are jumping on this just to learn about how to build teams and what teams can look like really speaks to how much under construction the entire revenue operations field is. These are a lot of times people that obviously never went to school for it, maybe never went to school for operations or to learn how to do Salesforce, but people that might have just picked it up as they went along, wanted to help others and wanted to figure out how to scale the organization and how to continue to grow it. So there is so many different approaches, and that's why I think the community is so exciting right now, because everybody is kind of willing to bounce ideas off of each other. And by virtue of being in revenue operations, you're kind of used to testing things out, seeing what fails, testing the stress points, seeing if you can scale, and you're not necessarily going to be able to see around every corner and to stress test every single thing you build. So that's why there's so many people coming together right now to really try to figure out what is the right combo, what are the right ingredients, what are the inputs and the outputs that are going to be necessary, and how do those differ from stage to stage, because a sales team of 2 people is going to have drastically different needs than a sales team of hundreds of people.
Yeah.
Colin, let me add to that because I love,
please,
Rob, I love your phrase of it's under construction, because if you rewind just a few years ago, I mean, you have different silos of operations teams happening, and then I remember, industry folks are talking about Rev Ops and what's Rev Ops, and we're starting to pull everything together, and it makes so much sense, regardless of the stage of growth that you're in or how many people you have. It's like, well, the functions are the same that need to get done, regardless of how many people you have, or if you have 50 people doing completely specialized things, or if you have one person doing everything. I mean, they all need to be pulled together. And so I love that. I love the under construction. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I was just thinking, so I was going to say like 6 years ago, 7 years, like whenever I first started, I started in sales ops. And when I asked or suggested maybe this is revenue ops, because that's an easy way to start to combine some of the disciplines. I was laughed out of the room. I was like, no, there's an article online that I read that this is a real thing. I said, surely that's not a real thing. There's no way that we could start to combine that. And that was, a few years ago. So it's remarkable to see it growing.
Changing a lot. And so to your point exactly about pointing to that article online, that's where we come to today. We're talking about defensibility, which, as Harish pointed out, and thank you for adding some nuance to this. Harish, you told me a defensible Rev Ops team structure, meaning you don't have to just point to one article, you can build a business case from the ground up, does not necessarily mean complete. So we can be defensible and still under construction. I thank Harish for that point. So that's what we want to talk about today. And by the way, I dropped the trivia question in the chat, y'all. So if you want to pop over there and take a guess, if you're within 5 percentage points, I want to see what your guesses are, then I'll send you a Sales Hacker hoodie. Okay, so the question then is, how do we proceed? This is the state. We know we need to build this function. Where do we start? And I'll take anybody on that. Where do we start?
Well, Colin, I want to double click a little bit on the defensibility.
Please.
I think that defines where we go. And I kind of describe Rev Ops tongue in cheek, like there's like the cloud 15 years ago or 20 years ago, right? When everything was in the cloud, and you ask 15 people a description of cloud, you'll get 18 answers of what the cloud is. And then you have this private cloud, hybrid cloud, my cloud, your cloud, Bob's cloud, Susie's cloud. So there's an element of like, what does it mean? And there's healthy ambiguity, and it should be healthy ambiguity, right? Because we're still understanding, how does this construct and mindset, in that case, it was a way of computing, and this way, it's a way of running your business. How does it fit into where we're going to go? And that's why I want to make sure people understand that nuance of, we need to have a little bit of defensibility, because we're going to have our CFO or anyone come to us like, hey, you're hiding 2 more heads. What am I getting out of it? Right? So you need to understand and draw a line of the impact of your business. But a lot of us get married on that ROI. And next thing you know, that's the only org we're thinking of. And I want to make sure defensibility is you're not complete. Defensibility means the path you're going down, it's going to add value. You might change those roles. You might pivot what those people do. You might look at broadening or narrowing the focus. So don't confuse defensibility with completeness. I think we're a few years away really from unlocking the power of Rev Ops. We're barely getting started. And I love the idea that even with the 3 of us, we have different ideas. I'm sure with the other 69 people on the webinar, we'll crowdsource even more. But eventually that there's going to be a pure model that wins, but we're not going to get there without trying a lot of things. So just that's kind of my mindset of why, if you look at it, and we'll talk about the kinds of things that I'm looking at, it might be very non-traditional, because we're pushing the boundaries of how we look at Rev Ops here.
Yeah, well said. And actually, this is a question then maybe fitting for Brandon, because Brandon, now that you're in a leadership position, Chief Commercial Officer, overseeing the build of this function, and in the past, I assume, maybe I'm assuming wrong, had to make a case for building the function. How did you go about making sure that the mindset in the organization is there? And how do you think about, building mindset into the organization for a holistic view of operations now as a revenue leader?
Yeah, it's so true, right? Because as you're running a profitable company, you ask the healthy questions, right? Okay, well, wait, what am I getting out of this head, and how can you quantify, the headcount that you're putting in there? And with a salesperson, it's easy. Okay, well, their quota is going to be this, and that's what we're going to get out of it. And the other roles, you have a bit more of a challenge to, articulate what the function is and what it does. And so what I think about is, regardless of the size of the Rev Ops team, I really kind of think of it in 3 different buckets. I think of it in strategy, I think of it in scalability, and I think of it in support. And so what I really want to tease apart is this like in the business versus on the business type of functionality or execution that is happening with my team. And the reason I start with the broader buckets is because it fits into whether or not, like we were talking about before, you only have 2 people, 3 people, 4 people versus a Rev Ops team of 20 people. They're really going to be focused on these kind of buckets. And so I am a big fan, and I've been kind of like posting about this and preaching about this, is that Rev Operations needs to have a seat at the table for strategy. Because if you don't have a seat at the table for strategy, your head of sales, your CROs, your VP of sales are going to come up with these, strategic visions of what's going to happen. And then you're missing the execution layer that's actually going to bring it to life. And so not only do you not know if it's even possible, but you don't have the business or sales intelligence with it. And also you don't have a head start on execution. And so that's why I think that, when I'm looking for a, head of Rev Ops, I really want somebody that's going to be a strategic partner, to be completely honest. And when I was in this role, I wanted to be that partner as well. And so it's like, okay, wait a minute, I want to make sure I'm helping facilitate strategy as well. Scalability, I view as, process efficiencies, automations, and there's that balance. And I love, Harish, you talking about ambiguity of roles and role delineation. Well, you have that with IT as well. Who makes the system update? Who has the keys to the castle of the CRM? Who can do, certain minimal admin functions versus whatever? And so, but I still feel like revenue options takes on a function of that, or a role of focusing on efficiencies, whether that's sales efficiencies or the other department efficiencies. And then support. I mean, you obviously have support. You have support for your managers. You have field desk type teams. You have, whatever the case may be, that's coming in there. And so I think of it in those three categories. And I'd be curious to hear Rob and Harish, kind of react to those and how it's structured, because I've seen it with big teams and I've seen it with small teams, but you still kind of hit on those three themes.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from Rob on that one specifically, because Rob, I think, it's funny, when we were talking earlier in prep, you mentioned categories that you break RevOps down into, and they made a lot of sense to me. But Brandon, the one you just listed, make a lot of sense to me too. So that's kind of part of the reason we're here. We know that we're not going to settle on a framework that everybody can use now, but I'd like to examine them a little bit. Rob, can you tell us a little bit about I think it was 5 or 6 buckets that you think about RevOps covering?
Yeah, absolutely. So incredibly similar, which is why I absolutely love this, because it's just kind of different names, and different ways to approach. So the first, at the current size where we're at, we have 5 different buckets, but we can very easily expand that to, say, 7. So the first is insights. So making sure that you have the intelligence and the numbers and data that you need to be able to actually get the feedback, on everything else that you're going to be doing. Because if you're flying blind, then nothing else that you're going to be building is going to make any difference. Within that, there's, you need to make sure that you have a strong BI person, or like a data architect, as well as a data admin that can kind of put things together. The second is then process. So you have the numbers. Now you want to build process to improve the numbers, or to even garner numbers in the first place, right? Now that you know what's important, you want to build on top of that. So building the process out. The third part, once you have the process, you want to be able to scale that. So systems would be the kind of that scalability component, and making sure that you can take your process and efficiently grow it beyond what it would otherwise organically grow as. The fourth is enablement. So you need to be able to teach people what the processes are, as well as how to use the systems to scale things up. So that would be the support, the support component that Brandon mentioned. And then the fifth, as of right now, we have a little bit of a deal desk component. So legal sits within making sure that we are writing up contracts, tokenizing contracts, making sure that that is living hand in hand with the rest of our revenue team that is solely focused on getting deals across the finish line. So those are...
And just to expand there, Rob, really quick, because we got a good question that's probably worth answering, is from Rick Nania. Thanks for the question, Rick. What is Deal Desk?
Yeah, so Deal Desk is one of those things similar to sales enablement that I feel like could mean one of 30 different things depending on what organization you are. Although I guess so is revenue operations. But Deal Desk for us is making sure that there is hand-holding throughout the deal process. So making sure that pricing is good, making sure that legal is good, making sure that the contracts are getting handled as necessary, looping in finance as necessary, and then helping to take care of commissions on the back end for us as well.
Yeah,
Right,
the way
I
like explain that, so kind of in general terms, a deal desk is kind of a sales help desk. So where a seller can go at any part of the sales motion to understand what to do, how to do it, get some support. So you're creating one point of contact. Really, really important, especially if you're in a growth organization, you have a lot of new sellers coming on board. Provides a mechanism where they are directed to do the right thing and helps onboarding that much more. So it kind of is enablement in action if you think about it.
And you know what? So thanks for that, Harish. And we just talked about a little bit about the way Brandon breaks down sort of the buckets of revenue operations, the way Rob breaks them down. Maybe this is where we can get real. So we wanted to do something little better than high level for you folks today. So what we're going to start doing is getting into some real stories, real examples of how revenue operations teams are built. We've got a couple, I think some folks here have brought some like example org charts, maybe some do's, maybe some don'ts. Harish, does it make sense to start? Because I know that you have kind of an innovative approach to how you're thinking and breaking out teams here. Does it make sense to start looking at some of that?
Yeah, and maybe before going into the org chart, I'll give a little background of why I formed this opinion of how I'm building Rev Ops, right? Which, early days in NetSuite, where we were serving a very large market, and when you're implementing ERP, it's a heavy lift, and it's a complex process. I mean, you a product with a lot of capability for a lot of verticals, and goes enterprise to SMB. You have a professional services team that has to deliver and implement someone on that technology. Then you have the ongoing carrying and feeding. And the top end, you have marketing. We're trying to build demand in a lot of different areas. And the whole point, if you look at, adding reps, creating a better ramp, adding velocity, reducing discounting, what about 200 different elements you're trying to make accretive? And we're sitting back, and as a public company, obviously, we're on the hook to deliver predictable revenue quarter over quarter. And the complexity of the businesses continue to grow. And the complexity of business continue to grow because every department or organization was doing the best to make their part of that entire supply chain optimized. But if you optimize every part of the supply chain, you're generally not going to optimize the entire supply chain, right? So there's going to have to be a give somewhere. So we clean sheeted our go-to-market, and we created this thing called Suite Success, which really started with the customer experience to begin with. How do we get our customers unlocking value as quick as we can? What is the best way to engineer that lifecycle relationship? And then how do we build that, reverse engineer that back all the way into our go-to-market motion, right? And a maturity started even influencing the product strategy, as it should. A good revenue strategy should drive a good product strategy, right? Those are two in this, one and the same thing. Like everyone talks about product and revenue separate, a whole separate conversation. Product is part of the revenue strategy. So we looked at how do we create packages and templates and create a better experience for a customer that allows us to then align with their pains, jobs to be done in an easier manner. So you're not going through a 15-step sales process. How do we then deliver that with the understanding of unlocking lifetime value and not maximizing on the land? How do we reduce the effort of PS by engineering the PS hours into the product? And it worked wonderfully. And it ended up becoming a big growth lever for us. But we had to untangle a lot of habits. We had to remove PS focused on just, their bonuses being on utilization or on margin. We had to change how support looked at. We had to change how marketing looked at how they're being measured as opposed to leads. And, what does it mean end to end from a pipeline and conversion perspective? So that focus and thought process really for me is the genesis of what became revenue operations and what everyone else had to build into, and that's what we're doing here, and that's what I'm trying to replicate. And I can't share, Colin.
Oh boy, that's showbiz, folks. Just a second.
It was a perfect crescendo, though.
I know. Here we go. All right,
we'll try it again. Where is my PowerPoint? Let's play the game of where's my PowerPoint. There it is. Or Google Slide for all us fancy people, I guess. But this is how I look at it. And I think Brandon hit on something that to me is so core. We all talk, I don't even like the word operations and revenue operations, because we're not worried about operations. It's execution that matters. Right. But when I think about what does my team do? Well, we support revenue execution and we support the revenue strategy. And these are the two key elements that I bring into play. And how are we doing more of what we do? How are we working harder and how are we working smarter? And that has to come together. Right. And the ops connotation to me is like, yeah, it's bean counting, it's stack. No, if we have operations that aren't leading to execution, then what's the point of the operation? So, making sure that we understand that is a critical part of how I think about Rev Ops. And I have these two organizations where, my revenue execution arm really focuses on the core element of how do we do more? How do we do more the right way? How do we continue to have and deliver on one customer experience, right? And now you have your systems and stack ownership, and you have your Salesforce architects, developers. We follow an agile methodology, so we have a program manager that helps make sure that we have the right elements of software design in place, and especially where we are, make sure that we test in QA and sandbox, and we have replicated environments, et cetera. Then we have the core operations, right? So this is, okay, now that we know the blueprint of how every team should run and what the process output should be, build out the teams to support these organizations in their delivery. And that's where we put deal desk. And then we have this concept of growth, where, and really for me, that concept of growth is important, because a lot of people say land and expand, and then they have this one size fits all model for land and expand. Land and expand are two very different motions, two very different funnels. How customers need to be engaged across that funnel requires very different partnerships with all the other organizations, from product marketing to marketing, et cetera. So we look at growth as a whole separate muscle that we build out, right? Mm-hmm. So we want to make sure that we have that forced focus in how we look at the execution of our business. But for me, the second part is, okay, execution is great, but then how do we be smarter? And it blows my mind, and I hate it when I hear a lot of Rev Ops operators talk about, insights. And, part of what we do is we create scale, and then we have a whole bunch of insights, and then the insights help improve the business. But how? How does strategy become execution? Who owns it? Who manages that change? How do you make sure that change sticks, right? So this is easier said than done, but this is where I really think Rev Ops is going to grow. Right? Who owns the end-to-end lifecycle architecture? Who's making sure that the experience is accretive? Who's making sure the right things are happening from the customer perspective, and the sum of the parts are great in the whole? Who's looking at how do we evolve the go-to-market strategy? And I love it, Brandon, as you said, Rev Ops should be that role, right? Should we be looking at different markets? How is our new market motions working out? How is our execution against those markets being driven? What are improvements we can make on our current execution? Right, and this could be as simple as territories and segments, but also really looking at, for example, do we separate land and expand? Do we have an account AE team and a growth team? Do we enter Japan? And if we decide we do, how do we enter Japan? Like that, a lot of that intelligence could be unlocked, and how do you export that business model can be unlocked from a revenue operations team. And being outreach and we have, our data is gold. Everyone's data is gold, but based on what we get from our platform, we get so much intelligence on end to end. How does a campaign translate to a persona, translate to content, translate to engagement, translate to op, translate to a closed customer, and taking the signal from the noise there and doubling down or improving on that data is key. But part of data operations is really having one data model in the journey, and not having marketing have their own master data model, and then sales having their own master data model. I think, Rob, you and I were talking about this, where your Salesforce developer was working on something on the Salesforce side and broke the marketing model, right? And the reality is we can't say we're a revenue operations end-to-end strategy unless we have a single data model built out as well to support all the other things we're doing. So yeah. For us, this is really kind of where we're going with it, and really looking at this concept of revenue architect, driving and pulling all the teams together from a strategy execution standpoint is that next evolution of where we want to take Rev Ops.
You know what? So having seen, like an org chart here, there are a lot of new titles there for a lot of people. And there's actually a really good debate. Thanks, Robert, for starting this debate going on in the chat right now. The question that Robert's, like in Robert's argument is really like, do we need all of these new jobs to do things that in the past, like sellers were basically doing for themselves in many cases? And I'm kind of curious what you think about that, Brandon, since you've done this now a few times.
Oh, I love it. I love that question. I love the I'll call it healthy conflict on the chat from Vicky, and I see Alexander jumping in there, and then Robert jumping in there again, and essentially it's wait a minute, why doesn't the rep just do all of this, which would be more expensive, more efficient on paper because you only have one head doing it. And so when I think of let's just talk about the sales org for example, and sales productivity. So really, like, sales operations is meant to do two things, in my opinion. It's meant to drive efficiencies, and so you can think of it on a little bit of a graph here. Drive efficiencies and then drive effectiveness. So how good they are at their job and how quickly can they do it, and in turn, that essentially is going to give you sales productivity. So to your point, Robert, if you are adding these headcounts and you're not getting more sales productivity, okay, maybe you have a little bit of an argument there. But the other thing I would think about is your seller activities. So think of your seller activities and what they're doing, and put it on a quadrant of, core selling activities, which is them engaging, talking to customers, doing demos, phone calls, you name it. Non-core activities, which are kind of the admin type stuff that we're talking about. And then on the other side, put internal activities and external activities. So how much of their time is spent on non-core internal activities, like facilitating this contract or updating a CRM or whatever, dealing with client issues after the fact, or I guess that would be external non-core. And then how much time are they able to spend on core selling activities, external core selling activities, which is the calls that they can make, the demos that they can do, the pipeline they can drive, the negotiations that they can have. And ultimately, these teams, these Rev Ops team members, whatever their function is that we've been talking about for this entire time, is ultimately getting to a goal, at least in the sales organization, for the sellers to spend as much time as possible on core selling activities, which will naturally drive their productivity up. And ultimately, you'll see higher quota attainment and even higher quotas and more production from those folks. And so essentially, that's the intention behind it. And I know there's just so many other benefits, but I was just kind of fixated on that one topic. And I would love the healthy conflict to continue on the chat message because I'm so interested in it.
That brings to mind that stat that's maybe everybody's seen floating around, but I don't remember exactly what it is or where it came from, but something like a seller really only spends like 30 or 40% of their time actually in the motion of selling. So the idea with any kind of revenue operations or sales operations, even support, would be to allow the person who's really good at selling to spend more of their time selling. That said, Robert does have a good point here, and the shape of the revenue operations team can change depending on like the maturity of your organization, maybe even your deal size. Like he made a point about, a high velocity, low average contract value motion where every deal is the same would make a lot of sense to focus on efficiency. With enterprise deals, maybe you're focusing a little bit more on effectiveness. We heard from Harish, who's looking at an org, developing an org chart, building a revenue operations function at a company with now we have 700, 800 employees at Outreach.
That's right.
Rob at Behavox, you've done this at a few different organizations, a few different sizes. How do you think about building a team and then adjusting for stage or for company size or maybe even deal size?
Yeah, for sure. And I really do love this conversation that's going on in the chat as well. It's
good stuff.
It's good stuff. It's the same conversation that you're often going to have. And it's one of those things that I started out as a rep and I was a lawyer before. So I was an appropriately miserable sales rep when I first started out. And it was a matter of, okay, I can go ahead and keep trying to figure this out for myself. But then I started breaking down my process, got got back end access to Salesforce, was building myself dashboards, became a better rep. And then it was, what if I could scale that kind of growth to the rest of the sales team? But let me share my screen, not to put anybody's slides to shame, but I did a real hi-fi presentation. Not actually. I just used our drawing tool. So it will have an exciting crescendo, but the first component was Wild West, and I'll go through these kind of fast. And it was mentioned before, but I came up on the sales ops side at Stack, and I was the first sales ops person. And then there was a marketing ops person that was hired, and we would just battle back and forth in terms of Salesforce fields. We were both admins. We were both able to go ahead and change fields, and he came in, changed something. It ruined almost all of the sales data. I came in, changed something. It knocked out the marketing team's data for MQL conversion and everything else. And so when you're just not communicating, not chatting with each other, it's a recipe for potential disaster, unless there's some kind of unified front between it. So I scrolled down to, what I then thought at the time was the best possible team, which was, okay, let's just have one person managing the people in each things. And it's like, wow, this is really a gold rush. I can't believe how effective this will be. The one issue was that you're almost looking for unicorns with each of these people, right? Because when you think about the scope of what each person needs to handle, you're saying, I want you to deftly go from crushing spreadsheets and just bending Excel to your whim, to then implementing new processes within Salesforce, to also saying, hey, I need you to be a subject matter expert, on UTMs or on Google Ads or something else. And you're just looking for people that they might exist, and they certainly do, but are they going to be executing everything at the exact level that you need? And I wasn't necessarily seeing that, because certain people just had certain strengths. So we shifted it. So I threw this one in too, just because I knew the conversation was going to come up in regards to how are you generating value, right? So if you, as an organization, are thinking high level of, all right, core stats that maybe I want to influence are pipeline quantity and quality, the conversion of it, the deal size or composition, the velocity of the sale or effort that needs to be put in. Like if those are kind of your core attributes, and then you're breaking everything down into stages, like Harish mentioned before, in terms of the customer journey, then maybe you're saying, okay, I want someone to just be concerned with getting things, maximizing the customer journey from A to B, and then someone else that's just going to be maximizing it from B to C, and then from C to D. But again, that I was worried that might run into similar problems. Marketing, we had a team in the past that was kind of a tofu, mofu, bofu, which I still can't say without smiling. But it was again difficult for the same reason, because the same person has to go through so much. So we switched it into a bit more of the functions so that you can actually get a BI person to do BI components. You could get like a Six Sigma black belt or someone to rock out on the process side. On systems, you can have a real developer that isn't just going to be someone that's going to say like, well, in Salesforce, I'll just go into production and add that field, no problem. Or like, sure, I'll create a new workflow. But someone that's going to be bringing the actual coding ability. We have someone on the team now who's just an incredible Salesforce developer and has built an entire set of like releases for Salesforce, and we can put like release notes out there and have everything done with branches and then reset things. And then enablement for people that are trainers, because certain people are going to get up in front of a room, be able to train, be able to inspire, be able to motivate, and everything else. This Next slide is going to be Robert's worst dream or nightmare, I guess. And so I just put a whole bunch of just like a whole slew of potential, like the top level roles, and then like examples of what different roles could be within. So much of this depends on what the needs are and how the organization develops, right? So do you need an RFX person within process? If you're not doing enterprise deals, no way. If every single deal that you're doing is a major bank and they're sending 400 questions every single time that relate to every single aspect of your company, then maybe you need somebody that's going to organize the 10 different people within the company that can organize those questions, make sure that they're up to date, make sure that you're answering the right way, and continue to grow from there, right? If you're not going into any new markets, or you're not taking on new industries, do you need a lot of new planning? No way. But potentially it's something to keep going with. Then I threw out something that we're experimenting with right now in terms of a center of excellence. So I put a Meister or Maester from Game of Thrones in terms of the model, where you have the people that are being assigned off to like the different castles and the such, but they're coming from like the core place, and then they're trained in the core place, and then they can go back to the core place to learn, new ways to improve. So you have someone that's helping with each of the divisions, but then you still have a center of excellence that's going to take on a lot of the product management, the tech, the project management, the BI process, the procurement of tools. And then by virtue of having almost a center of excellence that helps to fuel everything else, you're letting the people that are subject matter experts do what they need to do, and then to work with the rest of this kind of centralized team to continue to develop what they need to, right? So it depends how advanced your organization is, how much they're going to invest in kind of a centralized group of people. But even something as small as saying there's a project manager that can assist with every single thing, and you have someone that is running Gantt charts and creating decks and keeping everyone on schedule throughout the organization as you push out new projects, just makes a massive difference with execution.
This is really fascinating. Let me make sure I'm understanding you right here. So you're saying in this last example, basically you would have a member of the BI team, the business intelligence team, sort of, fly from BI Central to sit under a center of excellence, like alongside Rev Ops, and play a role of almost like liaison coordinator. Is that what I'm
exactly
right?
Exactly. So if you're able, to the notion of, okay, get some people in that are excelling at their roles, and then be able to scale that up for the organization, because inevitably things are just going to come flying in from every direction. So the more that you can have a bit of a centralized nervous system, it might be able to help the entire organization to scale, and not just have revenue operations. So one of the things we think about is that, Rev Ops, because it's such a thing now, or it's growing, there's a lot of times the opportunity to build teams faster. And then you have the product team that has no support, or you have DevOps, which is incredible, but product might not have a lot of support, or other organizations, HR might not have a ton of ops. So by virtue of this, you get people that are really strong and efficient, and then they're able to help to build out the other key components.
So a question. So Rob, I love
go ahead
with it, and I just want to ask Rob and Brandon, right? Because looking at the chat again, healthy conversation, but I think this is part of the ambiguity. When you talk to most people about Rev Ops now, they very quickly go to sales rep, right? Onboarding, comp plans, activity, being efficient, which is great, but that is just sales ops plus. When I think about revenue operations, I'm thinking about the entire revenue funnel. hey, from a, if you look at any SaaS organization, most of the revenue at some point in time when you're healthy comes from your install base, not acquisition, right? So it's something like how you deal with the customer success team and where are we getting blocks in onboarding? What can I do to engineer hours out of where they service customers? How do I get their portfolios bigger so I don't have to hire as many? Like, there's so many other questions on the revenue stream that are valuable. So do you feel like everyone's first flex is to go to a Sales Ops Plus and optimize and then build out? And because that's part of what I see in terms of the marketplace. You have people who think revenue and people who directly go to Sales Ops a little bit more index there when they think about Rev Ops. Curious on both of your perception ideas there.
I think you're spot on, and I would include myself in that naturally, which is okay to admit that. But I think what I saw in Rob's storyline of the navigation of kind of how you've failed fast and evolved your org, which I appreciate you kind of admitting like, hey, this was wrong, but we've evolved, into this and into this, is that you had specialization by function, which naturally makes them feel as though they're supporting the marketing org, the sales org, and the customer success org. And so that's essentially what I pulled out of it and what I loved. And I was envisioning the people in those roles saying like, okay, wait a minute, I'm insights, but I'm not reporting into sales or marketing or customer success. I'm supporting all three of them. So I'm equally dispersed, if you will. And so I think, Harish, to your point, maybe that pulls us out of that mindset that we, maybe have come from of Sales Ops Plus. So just my initial thoughts on that.
I like that.
We've got a question in the chat here, if you don't mind, guys. And this is actually from a friend of mine who I've known for a while. His name's Corey. He's got a company. They're growing really fast. So he's saying 5 to 10 reps right now. It's closer to 5, but it will be 10 really soon. And right now, my buddy Corey is doing all of the operations, everything, basically, at least having to do with revenue. His question is, how do we get ahead of it? What should his first hire be? Should he just make sure he's covering, has a sales ops, like a systems person first? Or is there a thought where he should hire somebody who could be a revenue operations generalist and leader and build a rev ops function over time? Any thoughts on that?
I got some thoughts here. And I think it's important to, in the interview process, evaluate their comfortability with the size of business. Right? Because you're not necessarily going to hire $120,000 analyst, because there's not really, they're going to end up not being as specialized as an analyst. They're going to have to do the process. They're going to have to help with comp plans. They're going to have to help with, you know what and so I think that it's more important for you to evaluate what size business that you're at and make sure who you're bringing in is comfortable with the multiple hats that they're going to have to wear within the role. And the other thing I would say is, I kind of think of, your first hire, you do want somebody to help you with, kind of those strategic thinking or critical thinking through this. But at the same time, they naturally are going to have to roll up their sleeves and do some of the brunt work, if you will. And so I'm almost kind of thinking manager level there, where it's like, okay, wait, you got to be an IC right now and you got to do everything, be a doer. But in 6 months, 12 months or whatever, I want you to be able to hire somebody and, kind of start shaping a team. So I wouldn't necessarily call that that you would be looking for a unicorn there, but I just really think it's important to really articulate, this is the size business that we're at. This is the maturity of where we are. This is what you're going to have to deal with, and almost set really clear expectations in the interview process so they don't show up and have a rude awakening of all the stuff that they're going to have to do.
Here's another parallel thought. RevOps often becomes a need, as Harish, just to bring this back home, as you pointed out at the start of this, is that it becomes a need when you've got these big sales operations, customer success, marketing operations functions working, and they are inadvertently building the Winchester Mystery House. And that's when the pain is felt and when RevOps becomes an important need. What do we think about, is it better, if you're starting to build an organization now and you're gaining momentum, is it better to start using point solutions or try for RevOps from the start? Maybe this is a repeat of Corey's question now that I say it out loud. What do we think?
I think that's where we are, Colin, and I don't think that's a bad thing, right? And I'll answer the question by not answering the question, I guess. Like the first thing everyone wants, I mean, and you go to is like, hey, look, if I'm going to build a business, I got to sell some stuff, right? And I got to create a process where I can build revenue. So your index is going to be on sales operations and hiring your first. I love the way Brandon put it, like hiring your kind of like the MacGyver of sales ops to start with, who thrives in ambiguity and understands how to solve and build, is probably a critical first hire, because that's where your pain is, right? What you don't want to do is you don't want solutions for problems you don't have yet, right? Number one, you can't take the cost structure on it, but number two, you're just going to get yourself off track. So I think, the first hire has got to solve how do I have a predictable, repeatable revenue, go-to-market revenue model? Once you get that going, you're going to get all these other first world problems come your way. But what you can do until you actually hire and build out this, and you can operate in silos for a while, right? You're not really going to break things. You're going to have the law of small numbers help you, right? You can get in a room and you can sort things out, and processes can be planned together. It's when you start dealing with customers in the thousands, employees in the hundreds, geographies in the 5 to 10 countries, then you start having these multiple, different centers that pull you, and you're trying to, gravity's trying to break you because you're getting pulled in different directions. Then it's important to think about consolidation, so you're owning the model and the experience. When you're small, that experience ownership can happen by crowdsourcing or getting the village together. So I really think it's a size thing. But what's more important, though, is when you start the business and you build it, have the mindset of, look, even if I have silos, I'm going to be very thoughtful in making sure that my customer experience doesn't devalue across my silos. I'm going to create that accountability. And while I might not have that in an org, I'm going to make that something that we review on a regular basis, right? So you take the mindset, and eventually when the mindset's too big, it's kind of like culture. Culture is hard to keep when you're big, but you find a way and you centralize and you have programs. Like a customer experience is hard to keep centralized, keep when you're big. So you're doing the same thing with the revenue operations muscle. So that's kind of my thought process of how you approach small to evolution.
Got it. Okay. So sorry, Rob, I want to take a really quick pause here, because we've got 8 minutes left. And in the next 8 minutes, I want to talk about where Rev Ops is heading next. We can answer a few more of these questions, final thoughts from our panelists. But before we jump into that, as you start shifting your mindset to what's next on your calendar, if you listen to nothing else, listen to me right now, because there's a couple more things I want to tell you about. First of all, SalesHacker has just launched a revenue operations discussion group. And what I'm going to do is volunteer Rob, Harish, and Brandon. If you go ask a question, share a thought or a takeaway from this conversation in that group right now, Rob, Harish, and Brandon are going to vote, and they're going to pick the best, most insightful, totally subjective, their favorite discussion that you start. So go sign up for SalesHacker community, start a discussion there. They're going to vote, and we'll send you some really cool stuff, maybe a hoodie, maybe something extra. The other note that I want to throw out there is that if you want to get together with if you're in revenue operations, so sorry, if you're not in revenue operations, this one's not for you. But if you want to get together with professionals who are like really in the same boat as you, similar stage, industry, a similar team size, in small groups with experts like Harish, Rob, Brandon, we've had other members of Harish's team at Outreach lead these. We're getting together small groups and roundtables to solve each other's real challenges, like crowdsource solutions, share ideas, complain. They are not recorded. Stuff gets real. So if you ever feel like you're on an island, I would check out the SalesHacker. The Rev Ops roundtables we're putting together are pretty good. All right, that's my plug. I'm not going to do a plug now. We can just go up to the end of the hour with last thoughts and questions. And I'm sorry I cut you off, Rob.
No, I had nothing super insightful to say. It was just that it might be indicative because of how many tools, how many amazing things there are out there right now, that you can dream of, okay, there's a Rev Ops group that's going to be 30 people. When I came from Stack, which had over 100 reps, and went to Behavox, which had 2 reps when I started. And the first thing I bought was Salesforce because I know I was going to have Salesforce. Second thing I bought was lean data because I was so shell shocked from having to build like a really advanced lead distribution tool at Stack. And I was like, my God, you know what I don't want to do? I don't want to build that again. Did we need that right then? No way, right? Because the marketing team wasn't up and running, like leads weren't coming in. There wasn't like a fully thought out MQL process or distribution process. I just like brought what I knew right then. Like I didn't want to build. But as you think about like when to scale, when to grow, you can use these kinds of roundtables. You can use these groups to say, okay, how many reps do I think I'm going to have by X? You know, what kind of marketing support do I think I'm going to have by Y? What's the customer success or post-sales team going to look by Z? And then start to build back from what that is, you know, based on your revenue goals and everything else. What is the team in place? What are the systems you're going to have in place? What are the processes you're going to have in place? And then kind of go back from there and build yourself that roadmap or build with other people so that you're able to kind of see around the corners later, and you're not led astray by like all of the really, really cool tech, because the worst thing is just to come in, buy 20 tools and be like, I did Rev Ops, I did it, I'm done. Like,
yeah,
we're good, you know. And you need someone devoted when you buy outreach. You need someone devoted to outreach. Make that something amazing. Let it help you to achieve the goal for what you brought it in for, and then continue measure institute change management and everything else around it.
Brandon, any final thoughts from you? Close out points we haven't hit.
Yeah. I'll answer your question and then I'll let Harish take us home here. So future of RevOps, I think the answer is obvious, because as the term we used at the beginning was under construction, right? So we're kind of in these early stages of it. And in my opinion, based on what I'm seeing, there's still so many companies that actually need to adopt this and need to be able to sell it to their leadership and need to be able to quantify the need for it, you know, when they only have 10 reps or whatnot. And so I still think that there's so much growth and exposure that needs to happen, you know, in revenue operations. And I think it's going to turn out, contrary to some of the healthy conflict we had on the chat, which I appreciate. I think it is going to turn out specialized, you know, similar to, you think of the book Predictable Revenue, where we got this concept of SDRs and AEs and inbound and outbound by Aaron Ross. I think it's going to evolve just like kind of the upfront sales motion has evolved into a little bit more specialization, kind of what Rob was showing. So those are my thoughts, and I'll turn it over to Harish.
I appreciate that. I mean, for me, I think it kind of comes back like Stephen Covey said it, right? The main thing is keep the main thing the main thing. I mean, that's where we are in Rev Ops, right? I mean, it means a lot of different things. So as we talk everything from Sales Ops Plus to, the works of art that Rob put up and then the titles I put up that are all brand spanking new. And we're all in a different part of the maturity curve. We're all learning, like sharing, exploring, doing the wrong thing, learning from doing the wrong thing. You know, we haven't crossed the chasm, right? We're early days of where Rev Ops is going to do it. And the key is let it mean something to you and your organization and build it out that way, as opposed to what is the industry standard? What is a blueprint? I got to go match that, because there's no industry blueprint, right? It's not defensible. It's incomplete. It's under construction. I think that's what I'd like all of you to take away is we're going to collectively get to a landing spot eventually, but there's no silver bullet formula that we can provide right now. So rather than make it defensible, make it meaningful and build from there.
Love it. Amen. What a great note to end on. Harish, Rob, Brandon, thank you so much for being here. Folks have asked actually how they should follow each of you or connect with you. So we'll do a lightning round. Harish, how can people find you?
Hit me up on LinkedIn. Happy to follow up one-on-one. Obviously, outreach is a big proponent of developing the revenue operations thought process. So would love to get connected with as many people as possible and share ideas.
All right, Rob?
Yeah, LinkedIn as well is amazing. I will happily send my Calendly over to anyone that wants to just kind of chat and hang out and talk about this. I'm always excited to learn what other people are doing.
Brandon?
Yeah, the obvious LinkedIn. Go ahead and send me a message there. But thank you for having me. It was a fun conversation. Appreciate it, Colin. And thanks to everybody on the chat.
Thanks, everybody. Love you, Sales Hacker community. Keep it real.